All right, let's dive into something we all know, but maybe don't fully appreciate. The power of storytelling. We've all heard the saying, facts tell, but stories sell.
Right.
But have you ever stopped to think about why that is? What's going on in our brains that makes stories so darn compelling?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah,
In a world saturated with information, stories are the things that truly cut through the noise. Think about it. You might forget a statistic or a product feature, but you're far more likely to remember a vivid story about someone using that product in a meaningful way.
exactly. It's like that example in our research about remembering smartphone features. A list of specs just kind of washes over you. But a story about a dad who almost missed capturing his daughter's first steps because his phone was dying. That hits you in the feels and you remember it.
That's the power of narrative, right?
Yeah.
It taps into our emotions and makes information sticky. There's actual science behind this. When we hear a story, different parts of our brain light up, including those associated with empathy and emotional processing. It's not just passive listening, we're actively engaged and relating to the characters and their experiences.
So it's not just about entertainment.
Right.
It's about understanding and remembering, too. It's like sneaking those veggies into a smoothie. You get the good stuff without even realizing it.
But hold on, sneaking veggies into a smoothie is pretty manipulative, isn't it?
Yeah.
Does that mean storytelling is just a sneaky way to manipulate people?
That's an interesting question and a valid concern.
Mm-hmm.
I think the key here is intention. Storytelling can absolutely be used for manipulative purposes, just like any form of communication. But it can also be a powerful tool for connection, empathy, and sharing important truths. Think about the stories that have shaped cultures and societies for centuries. Myths, folktales, religious texts, they all convey values, beliefs, and lessons through narrative. It's how we make sense of the world. That's a good point. It's not the tool itself, it's how it's used. So let's assume our intentions are good. We want to connect with people authentically, make our ideas memorable, and maybe even inspire action. How do we go about crafting a story that actually achieves those goals?
That's where we move from the why to the how of storytelling. And like any craft, there are certain elements that go into creating a truly compelling narrative. One of the most important is relatable characters. People need to see themselves or someone they know in the people involved in the story. They need to be able to connect with their experiences, their hopes, their struggles.
Yeah, without that connection, the story just won't land. It's like watching a movie with characters you just can't relate to. You're not invested in what happens to them.
Exactly. And another crucial ingredient is conflict. Conflict is what keeps us on the edge of our seats, wanting to know what happens next. It doesn't have to be some epic battle or dramatic showdown, but there needs to be some tension, some obstacle that the characters need to overcome. It's that element of uncertainty that keeps us engaged.
Oh yeah, that will they, won't they, or how are they going to get out of this mess? That keeps you glued to the screen, right?
You got it. But conflict isn't just about entertainment, it's also how we grow and learn. We see characters facing challenges, making choices, and dealing with the consequences. And through their journey, we gain insights and perspectives that we can apply to our own lives. That brings us to the next key element, resolution. A good story needs a satisfying ending where the conflict is resolved in some way.
So not just leaving us hanging, right? We
Right.
want to see some sort of closure, some sense that the journey had a purpose.
Precisely. The resolution doesn't necessarily mean everything ends happily ever after, but there's a sense of completion, of lessons learned, or a new understanding reached. It gives the story meaning and leaves the audience with something to ponder.
Okay, so we've got relatable characters, conflict, and resolution. That's a good foundation for a solid story. But there's another element you mentioned earlier that feels especially important in today's world: authenticity. What does that mean in the context of storytelling? Because we're bombarded with so much marketing and spin these days, it's hard to know what's real and what's just a fabricated story designed to sell us something.
You're absolutely right. Authenticity is critical, and it's something people are increasingly attuned to. In a world of carefully curated online personas and polished marketing campaigns, genuine human stories stand out. People crave realness. They want to connect with stories that feel true, vulnerable, even imperfect.
So it's about stripping away the pretense, the corporate speak,
Yeah.
and just being real, right? Like that example in our research about the small business owner.
Yeah.
A heartfelt story about how a particular service transformed their business is going to be way more powerful than some generic ad claiming to be the best in the industry. People can smell a phony story a mile away.
Exactly. And it's not just about being honest, it's also about being specific and relatable. Instead of making vague claims or using overly polished language, tap into the details, the emotions, the sensory experiences that make a story come alive. Show, don't tell.
Okay, I'm getting this. Relatable characters, conflict, resolution, and authenticity. These are the cornerstones of a good story. But how do we know which story to tell? Because we all have a million stories swirling around in our heads, right? How do we choose the ones that are going to resonate with our audience and actually have an impact?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the next stage of our deep dive, finding the right story to tell. And there's a simple framework that can help us do just that. First, we need to get crystal clear on our own values or the core message we want to convey. What do we stand for? What are we trying to achieve with our story?
Okay, so that's step one, know your core message. What's next?
The second step is understanding our audience. Who are we trying to reach? What do they care about? What are their needs, their aspirations, their pain points? Because a story that resonates with one audience might fall completely flat with another.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot where our message and our audience's interests intersect, where our values align with what they care about. That's where the magic happens, right? The Patagonia example. Their stories about environmentalism and sustainability really resonate with their target audience of outdoor enthusiasts. It's a perfect marriage of message and audience. But what if you're not selling hiking gear? How does this apply more broadly?
That's a great example, and it illustrates the principle perfectly. But you're right, it's not just about selling products. This framework applies to any type of message, whether you're a business leader trying to inspire your team, a teacher trying to engage your students, or an artist trying to connect with your audience. It's about finding those human, relatable stories that bridge the gap between what you care about and what your audience cares about. And when you find that intersection, that's when you can truly create a powerful and lasting impact.
This is fascinating. We've covered a lot of ground already, why stories are so powerful, the key elements of a good story, and even how to choose the right story to tell. But I bet our listeners are eager to hear more about the how. How do we actually craft these compelling narratives, especially for video? What are the techniques, the secrets, the tips and tricks that can elevate our storytelling to the next level?
Well, hold on to your hats because that's exactly where we're headed next. When it comes to crafting a compelling story, especially for video, there are some techniques that can really elevate your narrative and captivate your audience. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard is to think of your story like a journey. You're taking your audience on a journey from a starting point to a destination. And just like a well-planned trip, there are key landmarks you want to hit along the way.
I love that analogy. It makes the whole process feel more manageable,
Mm.
like we're plotting points on a map instead of staring at a blank page.
Hmm.
So how do we map out this storytelling journey? What are the essential landmarks we need to hit along the way?
First and foremost, you need to establish a clear beginning. This is where you set the scene, introduce your characters, and most importantly, give your audience a reason to care. Why should they invest their time in this story? What's at stake for the characters? What's the hook that will grab their attention and make them want to keep watching?
Right. You've got to hook them from the start. It's like the opening scene of a movie. If it doesn't grab you, you're likely to tune out. What are some ways to create that initial hook? Can you give us some examples?
Absolutely. Think about posing a thought-provoking question, introducing a compelling character facing a dilemma, or hinting at a mystery that needs to be solved. You want to pique the audience's curiosity and make them eager to see how the story unfolds. For example, imagine a video that starts with a close-up shot of a hand nervously tapping on a table, while a voiceover whispers, "I knew this day would come, but I never thought it would end like
Ooh,
this."
that's good. You've got me hooked already. I want to know what's going to happen. Okay, so we've got a strong opening. What's next? How do we keep the momentum going?
Once you've set the stage, you need to build tension and conflict. Remember, conflict is the engine that drives the narrative. It's what keeps things interesting, challenging the characters, and pushing the story forward. Now, conflict doesn't have to be explosive or over the top. It can be subtle, internal, or even comedic. The key is to create obstacles that your characters need to overcome, whether those obstacles are external circumstances, internal struggles, or interpersonal conflicts.
So throw in some roadblocks, some setbacks, some moments of doubt.
Right.
Don't be afraid to let your characters struggle a bit. After all, nobody wants to watch a story where everything goes smoothly.
Exactly. Because it's through those struggles that your characters grow, evolve, and reveal their true nature. And it's through those struggles that the audience connects with them on a deeper level. We all love a good underdog story, right?
Hmm.
Seeing someone overcome adversity is incredibly inspiring.
It reminds me of that quote, "The obstacle is the way." It's not about avoiding challenges, but facing them head on. That's where the real growth and transformation happen. But too much conflict can be exhausting, right? At some point, we need some resolution, some sense of closure.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the next crucial landmark, the resolution. The ending of your story is just as important as the beginning. It needs to provide a sense of closure, a payoff for the audience's investment in the journey. Now, resolution doesn't necessarily mean a happy ending. Sometimes the most impactful stories end on a bittersweet note, leaving the audience with lingering questions or a call to action. But regardless of the tone, the resolution needs to feel earned and satisfying.
So tie up those loose ends, answer those lingering questions, and leave the audience with a feeling of completion. Whether it's a sense of triumph, a newfound understanding, or even a touch of melancholy, it's about making the journey feel worthwhile.
Exactly. And when it comes to video, remember that you have this incredible tool, the power of visuals, to enhance your storytelling. Use imagery, music, pacing, and editing to evoke emotion, create atmosphere, and bring your story to life. Think about how a close-up shot can convey intense emotion, how a sweeping landscape can inspire awe, or how a well-chosen piece of music can set the mood.
Right. It's not just about the words you use, but the entire sensory experience.
Yeah.
You're painting a picture with sound and vision, adding layers of meaning and impact.
Precisely. And this is where the real artistry of video storytelling comes in. It's about making deliberate choices with every shot, every sound, every edit to create a cohesive and compelling narrative that resonates on multiple levels.
This is all so fascinating, and I'm starting to see how these techniques can be applied not just to marketing videos or documentaries, but to any form of communication that aims to engage and connect with an audience. Whether you're giving a presentation, pitching an idea, or even just sharing a personal anecdote, these principles can help you make your message more impactful and memorable.
Absolutely. And one final piece of advice I'd offer is this. Don't be afraid to experiment and have fun with it. Storytelling is a creative process, so allow yourself to play around, break the rules, and find what works best for you and your audience.
That's such a great reminder. Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to do things right that we forget to tap into that playful, creative energy that makes storytelling so enjoyable. It's about finding your own voice, your own style, and letting your passion shine through.
Exactly. Let your enthusiasm be contagious, because ultimately the most compelling stories are the ones that are told with heart and conviction.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, exploring the why and the how of storytelling. We've talked about the science behind why stories resonate with us, the key elements that make a story captivating, and even some practical techniques for crafting a compelling narrative, especially for video. But I'm curious, what are some of the common pitfalls or mistakes that people make when it comes to storytelling? Are there any red flags to watch out for?
That's a great question because even with the best intentions, there are some common traps that storytellers can fall into. One of the biggest mistakes is trying to force a story that isn't there. Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to make something sound impressive or exciting that we lose sight of the genuine human experience at the heart of the story.
Right, it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. You're forcing something that doesn't naturally fit, and it ends up feeling contrived and inauthentic.
Exactly. Another common mistake is neglecting the emotional core of the story. We can get so focused on the facts, the details, the plot points, that we forget to tap into the emotions that make a story truly resonate with the audience.
It's like telling someone about a delicious meal without describing the flavors, the aromas, the textures. You're giving them the information, but you're not giving them the experience.
That's a perfect analogy. And a related pitfall is failing to connect the story to a larger purpose or theme. Every good story has a deeper meaning, a message that transcends the specific events of the narrative.
So it's not just about what happens in the story, but what it means, what it says about the human condition or the world we live in. Without that deeper layer, the story risks feeling shallow or insignificant.
Exactly. And one more trap to watch out for is getting so caught up in the technical aspects of storytelling, whether it's fancy camera work, flashy editing, or clever wordplay, that you lose sight of the story itself.
Ah, yes, the classic case of style over substance. It's tempting to get seduced by the bells and whistles, but ultimately it's the story that matters most.
Exactly. All those techniques and tools are valuable, but they should serve the story, not overshadow it. Always remember that the heart of storytelling is about connecting with people on an emotional level, sharing experiences that resonate and inspire.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like we've peeled back the layers of storytelling and revealed the essential ingredients that make a story truly impactful. We've talked about the science, the structure, the common mistakes, and even the art of using visuals to enhance our narratives. But I'm curious, where do we go from here? What are some final thoughts or actionable takeaways that our listeners can implement to take their storytelling to the next level?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is to simply embrace the power of storytelling. Recognize that it's not just a marketing tactic or a creative pursuit, it's a fundamental way of communicating, of connecting with others, and of making sense of the world around us.
So it's about recognizing that we're all storytellers in our own way, whether we realize it or not. Every time we share an experience, offer an insight, or try to persuade someone, we're engaging in a form of storytelling.
Precisely. And the more we're aware of the principles and techniques of storytelling, the more effective we can be in all aspects of our lives.
That's empowering, isn't it? It takes
Yeah.
away that feeling of, I'm not a creative person or I don't have any good stories to tell, because we all do. It's just about tapping into that innate human capacity for narrative.
Exactly. And it's a skill that can be developed and honed over time, just like any other craft. The more you practice, the more confident and effective you'll become.
So where do we start? What's a good first step for someone who wants to become a better storyteller?
I'd say the best place to start is by simply paying attention to the stories you encounter every day. In books, movies, conversations, even everyday life. Notice what grabs your attention, what makes a story memorable, what evokes an emotional response in you.
That's like training your storytelling muscles,
Right.
becoming more attuned to the elements of a good narrative.
Exactly. And as you start to become more aware of those elements, you can start experimenting with incorporating them into your own storytelling. Start small. Share a personal anecdote with a friend, practice crafting a short story, or even experiment with creating a simple video using your smartphone.
The key is to just start doing it right. Get out of your head and start putting those stories out into the world.
You got it. And don't be afraid to get feedback. Share your stories with people you trust and ask for their honest opinions. What resonated with them? What could be clearer or more engaging?
Feedback is so valuable, isn't it? It can help us see our stories from a different perspective and identify areas where we can improve.
Absolutely. And as you continue to practice and refine your storytelling skills, you'll find that it becomes more natural, more enjoyable, and ultimately more impactful.
That brings me to another question that I bet is on our listeners' minds. What about those of us who feel intimidated by the idea of storytelling? Like it's some magical talent that you either have or you don't. Any advice for those who are feeling a bit hesitant to embrace their inner storyteller?
I'd say to anyone feeling intimidated, remember that storytelling is inherently human. We've been telling stories since the dawn of time. It's how we communicate, connect, and make sense of the world. So it's not about being a natural or having some extraordinary talent. It's about tapping into something that's already within you.
It's like unlocking a hidden superpower.
Right.
And maybe that superpower has been dormant for a while, but it's there waiting to be unleashed.
Exactly. And the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. So my advice is to be kind to yourself, start small, and don't be afraid to experiment. Find your voice, your style, and the stories that you're passionate about telling.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
There are so many resources available these days to help you develop your storytelling skills. Books, workshops, online courses, and even communities of fellow storytellers who can offer support and encouragement.
That's a great point. There's a whole world of storytelling resources out there waiting to be explored. So if you're feeling inspired to take your storytelling to the next level, don't hesitate to reach out for guidance and support.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the science behind storytelling, the key elements of a compelling narrative, and even some practical tips for crafting your own stories, especially for video. We've talked about the importance of authenticity, the power of visuals, and even the common pitfalls to avoid. But most importantly, I think we've highlighted the fact that storytelling is not just a skill, it's a superpower that we all possess.
I couldn't agree more. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to leave our listeners with a question from our source material. What's your story? What makes you and your message unique? How can you bring that to life through the power of storytelling?
That's a great question for everyone listening to ponder. What's your story? And if you're ready to take your storytelling to the next level, remember Studio 86 is here to help. We can help you craft compelling narratives that captivate your audience and get results.
We can guide you through the process of finding your voice, structuring your story, and even using the power of visuals to create a truly unforgettable experience.
So if you're feeling inspired and ready to unleash your storytelling superpower, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to hear your story and help you bring it to life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of storytelling.